call this meeting to order. I have a forum. Please stand for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Robinson. I will make a motion to include Mr. Eric Robinson, Mark Schuster, and Tim Paulson into our meeting electronically. I make a motion. Second. Everything has to be a roll call vote now. Yeah. Mr. Schuster, I made the motion. Toby seconded it. We're going to do a roll call vote, please.
Correct. Every action needs a roll call.
Thank you. Give it a minute.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klein.
Aye.
Mr. Coach.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Abstain.
Motion passed 4-1.
All right. I don't have to make citizen comments.
Yes, Mr. Frank Wilson.
We're just here about the shed issue.
And Bill Bennett. Same thing.
All right.
That's it for tonight.
That's it for tonight. And you should have the meeting minutes from June 4th, 2020. Just review those. Changes.
You have a change, I don't know if it's just how it needs to be worded in new business. I wasn't asking for a variance for two of the individuals that were here. It was for a variance for anybody that was applying for the shed until we figure out a way to where it makes it look like I was trying to make some two families that was actually applying.
Any other changes? I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes with the change on page 4.
So moved.
Questions or comments? Roll call voice. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Klein.
Aye.
Mr. Coach.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Oh. Mr. Hedges, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, we'd like to present two tourism grant reports for fiscal year 2020 on behalf of Coon Creek Days and the Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Lyons will give us a short summary. There's no action required, it's just information purposes.
So included in your packet were the 3 grant reports submitted by the Chamber, as well as that single report submitted by the Coon Creek Country Days Committee. And so this is up for review and comment with respect to evaluating whether or not their programs do meet the funding requirements, which is to provide or promote conventions for tourism and overnight stays within the village. Their funding is out of the hotel motel tax, and that is the state statute, which as a non-home rural community requires use of the funds for those purposes.
And we would say that in both cases, they do meet the requirements.
Question, we're not even thinking about giving them any money this year since it's canceled, correct?
Actually, just yesterday, I received an email where they are requesting funds, and I've asked them to be more specific about sending us a formal request on what they would provide for fund. But it's going to be very difficult to fund anything that doesn't actually happen in order to meet the guidelines of the hotel tax. So we've asked them first. You're talking about Coon Creek now.
Correct.
And we've asked them for a formal request.
So is the vote that we're about to do to state that these activities qualify? We're not voting to say we're going to allocate this amount of
Actually, you
money.
notice it says no action required, so there's no vote required.
So there's nothing, okay.
No, it's really just a matter of information and really just to set up the next thing on the agenda, which is the chamber's request for funding for next year.
Gotcha, okay. That's what it was. Like,
But you do every year receive a report, and you will at this point forward on previous year's activities. So if there are no other questions, we'll just move on to the next item, which is a motion to approve this week 2021 tourism promotion grant to the Hampshire Chamber of Commerce. On the slides, we'll describe it briefly, and Jeannie's here if you have any questions.
Jeannie has laid out some information for you on how the Hampshire Chamber intends to promote tourism and overnight stays in Hampshire this year. It's greatly expanded from their limited activities. As Mr. Hedges said, believing that they do meet the requirements for promoting tourism and overnight stays, it's our recommendation that you authorize me to send an award letter. Similar to last year, they're asking for $6,000 in funding again this year.
Any questions, comments?
I just want to say, say thank you to Jeannie. Jeannie has been a great partner. It is a development commission. She's come to pretty much every single meeting that we've had. Has been a strong contributor and has done a lot of work outside the meeting to help move our objectives forward. So it's been a significant improvement, I think, over what we've had in the past, and I'm thoroughly in favor of
I do have a question. The $6,000 request is not equal to the budget for those items. Is it, do we know, is this just a pool of $6,000 that they then determine which events and which things it goes to, or?
Right. So we've never really set a particular dollar amount requirement per activity, but as long as they've promoted it to the extent of $6,000.
So we don't have to report that out of the $6,000, X amount went to this activity that qualifies, X amount went to this activity that qualifies.
No, we do
Okay.
not have.
We'll get a similar report to what you have this year from now. It'll satisfy.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then I will entertain a motion to approve the funding award, issue a letter to the Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, the amount of $6,000.
So move.
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
So, all right, Brian first, Toby second, Mr. Schuster. Clarification? Any further-
Toby, Ryan.
Toby first, Ryan second.
There we go. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coe.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klein. Aye. Motion passed.
Mr. Mayor, we have a resolution adopting garbage collection fees. And again, Ms. Lyons will tell us about that.
So as Mr. Kelly announced at the last meeting, Waste Management's rates are going up by 3%. And I propose that Hampshire's rates follow that 3% increase. This will add $1.34 to non-senior garbage rates for the bi-monthly billing cycle and 92 cents for senior garbage. Keep in mind that all funds generated in the garbage fund stay in the garbage fund. And this will cover our costs for not only garbage collection, but also for printing, postage, and administration.
The 3% is contractual 3%.
On the waste management side, yes. And it was in 2016 when we went to this 5-year agreement with Waste Management that we determined that the 1% above the garbage collection fees that the village were receiving was not sufficient to pay the postage and all those things. So that's when we changed to a, on a time, or, you know, on a, from time to time, the village board can set the rates, and so this is the time that we decide on. This will be effective with the July billing.
Any questions or comments?
I didn't realize the water was such a big part of my bill. I'm surprised the garbage is so low. Shocked.
A lot of people staying home don't realize how much water they use when they're staying home.
I think so.
Any other questions or comments? I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 20-05, a resolution adopting garbage collection fees in the village.
Second.
All right, first by Kelly, second by Krajewski. Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robinson,
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki,
Aye.
Mr. Coe,
Aye.
Ms. Klein, Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, we have a motion to approve a sidewalk project reimbursement to Mr. Don Wesson for $600. We have an agenda supplement from Mr. Ray, if you'd like to have any questions, if you have any questions.
Any questions or comments? All right. $600, right?
Third of the total.
That's his reimbursement is 600 out of the 1,800. But are we approving the contract with Herrera? We're not approving the contract with Herrera, that's it, right? So we're just going to reimburse $600.
It's 1/3 of the 16.4, correct?
You got two quotes, one for 16. First, the 1,800 because the customer service.
And I would entertain a motion to approve the reimbursement to Mr. Don Weisman, the amount of $600 for the work that he'll have done on the sidewalks.
Second.
First by Kelly, second by Klein. Questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coe,
Yes.
Ms. Klein. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, we have an ordinance amending the Village of Hampshire Fire Code. This is just a cleanup ordinance, and Attorney Schuster will answer your questions, but it's very straightforward. We've been using this code for years, it's just a cleanup in our
Any questions or comments on the language change? All right, then I will entertain a motion to approve ordinance 20-22, an ordinance amending the zoning regulations relating to performance standards for village for fire prevention and safety.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Ms. Klein. Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson,
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki,
Aye.
Mr. Coe.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, we have an ordinance amending the village code regarding storage sheds. As you all know, there's been considerable discussion about this item for quite a long time, and I believe we've come up with a solution here that satisfies particular homeowners involved, as well as making the majority of sheds in the village that are already built also legal in this case. So just a brief explanation. You have some drawings in front of you. What this does is it allows sheds in the rear yard and the side yards 50% of the way back from the front of your house. That does handle pretty much every side load car garage in town. This would be for corner lots and interior lots. Term that Lord was nice enough to share with me that I think helps a lot. So I think this does satisfy a lot of the issues around town. I think it'll be well received by our residents. And it does put to bed an issue that's been on our calendar since last fall.
All right. Questions or comments?
Well, your violations page, is that the number within there is the number of homes that have a shed that currently violates the ordinance?
That's
by that
correct. Only based on the list that was provided to us by a resident last meeting. So out of the, I believe it's 91 total sheds he found, approximately, a little over 20 of them are out of code. And that's where they are.
This change will resolve all of them.
Just the ones in the side yards.
Also,
Like these two up here.
still are.
Everybody understand the chart in front of you? Last page is where the sheds would be allowed.
How are we determining where C and D begin and end?
50% of the way back from the front of the house.
From the front of the house, not from the front of the property line?
Correct.
Tim Paulson on there?
So,
Yeah.
so this,
No, I was thinking of originally.
talking about the street.
No, that makes sense.
Do you have any questions, Tom?
No, nothing. Ready to move forward. So the rubber's under real base.
Any further questions or comments?
Did you get your sign?
Then I will entertain a motion to approve ordinance 20-23. An ordinance amending the zoning regulations relating to accessory buildings in residential and estate zoning districts in the village.
So move.
Second. Robinson first, Coach second. Any questions or comments?
So this is going to supersede, I'm gonna pass that,
This is the,
what the zoning board just came back with, the recommendation.
yeah, we're,
We're throwing that out and going with this.
yes.
Okay.
The recommendation, was that presented last time? Oh, that one, okay.
This is actually very similar. What the zoning board did was would have approved it all the way to the front of the house. So it's really just a slight modification of what they recommend.
So the zoning board recommended to include C.
Those two, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I do too. Good maintained.
Any further questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robinson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Klein? Aye. Mr. Coe?
Aye.
Mr. Jackie?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Sure.
File your permits
Give us
tomorrow.
something that makes sense.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you
Well
for
done.
waiting.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you
for
very
your
much.
help and hard work.
Yes.
And not just going and building it anyway, so really appreciate, that helps us fix this, so. To help future people who have the same issue.
Mr. Mayor, you're welcome. Mr. Mayor, I've asked EEI, Tim, first of all, could you check in, Tim? Can we hear you all right?
Okay, yes, I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now. If you want to go ahead and put your exhibit up, and I'll introduce you while you're doing that.
Okay.
We've had several discussions with EEI since the last the board meeting a month ago, after all the rain that we had in the village, to consider what some of the options are, but equally as important, I think, to do a little bit of a history of stormwater management, not just in our village, but in the area. Tim is a real expert on this, and he's the pro at EEI, so he's been very helpful. I think he's put together some good exhibits. Tim, are you sharing your screen now?
Yes, I am. Can you see it?
Not yet, so you might want to try again.
Okay.
We did practice this earlier. I'm gonna get out of your way so you can see.
No.
Oh,
so
no,
you
that's
can't
what
see it on there.
right, one more try here.
That's progress.
Here we go, we're good.
So again, I'll just introduce Tim and let him handle it. That'd be time for questions.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be here. There might be a little lag on some of the slides as I move them, so just bear with me on that. But just going to talk a little bit about stormwater, particularly in Hampshire and some of the issues that have come up recently. We'll first do a review of stormwater ordinance, the history of the stormwater ordinance in Hampshire, then look at what the current stormwater standards are, talk about a couple of problem areas that have been ongoing and also experienced problems in May with the big rains. And then just briefly look at some past studies and improvements that have been accomplished, and then touch briefly on where we might find opportunities for future improvements. And then we'll be open for questions on any of the topics or discussing other drainage areas than the ones I have exhibits for. So quick review of history of ordinances in Hampshire. The first Hampshire stormwater ordinance, I believe, came into effect in 1985. That was based on a model ordinance prepared by the Northeastern Illinois Planning Commission. It was adopted by a lot of communities in the area. Some developments that were developed under that ordinance would include Old Mill Manor, Hampshire Prairie, fields, meadows, and hills. And that was the first time when stormwater was required. And then in 2002, Kane County developed their countywide ordinance, and a number that coincided with a number of developments that then followed that ordinance, including White Oak Ponds, Hampshire Highlands, Tuscany Woods, Lakewood, and Prairie Ridge. And then finally, last June 1st, the county revised their countywide ordinance. And one key thing I wanted to raise with that is just to note that at about the same time, the state water survey updated their rainfall records in a publication called Bulletin 70. And the new ordinance uses those new numbers. And on the graphic on the slide shows the change in the 24-hour, 100-year rainfall event based on the new statistics. The old report was in 1989, so this adds about 30 years of data. And you see in northeastern Illinois that the 24-hour, 100-year storm went up about an inch. So it went from 7.58 inches to 8.57 inches. Some of the current stormwater standards that are in the countywide and village ordinances include, for storm sewers, we look at a 10-year design event for all new storm sewers. So we should be keeping pavement free of standing water in the 10-year event and prevent ponding on roadways and out of rear yards in 10-year design events. And then detention continues to use a 100-year design event with a release rate of 0.10 CFS per acre. The new ordinance then does more with best management practices than the previous ordinance. So they're now, instead of just encouraging best management practices, they're requiring them for new developments and redevelopments. And those focus on things that deal with volume control, not just peak runoff rates, but reducing the total amount of water that comes off of a development, primarily through incorporating and promoting infiltration. The pictures on this slide are from it's an alley that had poor drainage, and then it was replaced with permeable asphalt. So instead of water standing on the pavement along the edges of the road, it is able to soak in and solve that drainage problem in that location without excessive grading or having to install new storm sewers. Another focus of the current stormwater ordinance is on the overflow routes, making sure that there are 100-year emergency overflow routes and new developments. The The graphic on this is from actually, I believe it's from White Oak Ponds Development. One of the keys is that these areas are in easements so that the village can come in and clean them out if necessary, if there's a problem with any of the overflows. And generally speaking, so you calculate a 100-year flow and a high water level, and then you're ensuring that the lowest adjacent grade or the foundation of the houses that the overflow might be adjacent to is at least 2 feet above what you expect your emergency overflow water elevation to be. There's also a new focus on offsite considerations with the new ordinance, looking at how upstream tributary areas are handled, how upstream areas are routed through the stormwater system for a new development. Also looking at downstream capacity, particularly with regard to agricultural land and use of drainage swales and drain tiles that are being used for agriculture, and not allowing stormwater to be discharged into agricultural systems without improvements. And then again, there's still erosion and sediment control and floodplain and wetland regulations that have been updated to keep current with state and federal standards in those areas. I have a couple of exhibits here, and if you just bear with me, I've got to get rid of I'll try to get that sized. There we go. So this is exhibit of the whole village area. Doesn't quite fit on the screen. There we go. So the dark outline is the village limits, and then there's an area with the dashed outline, which is labeled here Central Hampshire area, but that's basically the older part of town, developed pre stormwater management. You can see some of the areas that were developed after the first stormwater ordinance over in Hampshire Prairie, and then south of 72, you start to see some detention basins showing up. And then as you get to the newer areas over at White Oak Ponds and Hampshire Highlands and Tuscany Woods, you see an increase in detention basins relative to land area based on the increasing detention requirements. And all of Hampshire is, especially this central part of Hampshire, is tributary to various tributaries of Hampshire Creek. There's the one that runs through the west side of town, and then the one north of town across the State Street, and it joins up and all drains to the west to the Kishwaukee River. It's one watershed, but several major sub watersheds. See if I can. And then the next exhibit is a little bit jumpy. I apologize for that. This exhibit is a zoom in on more of the central part of Hampshire. We might come back to this later to talk about some of the drainage issues, but you can see where Old Mill Manor was developed in the 90s. They put it in detention, increased some storm sewer. It goes to the creek. Hampshire Highlands and parts of White Oak Ponds go to the south and into that same creek. Tuscany Woods goes to the north to this creek, and then it all comes over and joins on the west side of town. Just to get a perspective of how everything kind of works together as one watershed, but different outfall locations. So these newer developments to the east do not generally travel through storm sewers in the older part of town to get to the creek, but they take other routes. And then discuss some of the problem areas that we've been seeing in town. Bear with me a sec here. I'm going to readjust my scale. So these areas are generally concentrated in the older part of the village. There's some common issues that we deal with. One, some of these areas were developed without adequate storm sewer capacity. A lot of times there's poor lot drainage. Things are quite flat. A lot of times there's low areas and depressions. Land doesn't always grade away from the house well, and sometimes you'll see foundations below street level, which causes a lot of the problems that we see in some of the areas where we have home and basement flooding, because when the storm sewers can't handle the runoff and the streets flood, and then it overflows when the foundations are below street level, then that's where you'll see the water running off and into people's homes. And another issue is no overland overflow routes for some areas, and the lack of outfall capacity for some of the storm sewer systems. Just going to run through, there's a quick partial list of drainage concerns. These are all concerns that came up in May, and many of them are also long-standing issues. Just to get they are focused mainly in the older part of town, as you all know. And tonight, I've got a couple exhibits coming up for the 100 block of Panama and the 300 block of Highland Avenue, to focus initial discussion on those two areas, because we've done some more planning and work in the past on those areas and have some ideas of how to address those in the future. So we'll talk about those, and then we can talk about any other items that you guys would like to talk about. Also have a partial list of past studies and improvements that have happened. These are long-standing drainage issues, and we've been working on them and developing plans and implementing improvements as we're able, wherever we can and when we can. Something like Panama Street and South Street Storm Sewer has received improvements. There's additional work that needs to be done there. A couple years ago, we did the Highland Avenue drainage investigation on Highland Avenue, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We have some ideas how to address some of those problems. Just to demonstrate that we're working on these. The village has been diligent in studying and addressing these drainage problems and implementing them as there are opportunities to implement them. So now I'm going to switch back to an exhibit, first talking about Panama Avenue, the 100 block of Panama Avenue, where I understand there were a number of drainage problems in May, some basement flooding. The previous improvements included installing an 18-inch storm sewer on South Street and Panama, and which then ties into an existing 15-inch that crosses State Street. And but the states at the time that was done, those improvements were done, weren't able to complete crossing of State Street and some other improvements that might have further helped that issue. That ties into an 18 and then a 24-inch that heads over to the creek. So in 2008, when the South Street storm sewer was constructed, and try to zoom in here a bit to the intersection, there was a phase 2 that was designed, was not able to be constructed due to cost issues and a number of conflicts with existing utilities crossing State Street. With storm sewer, of course, you're dependent on grade, which means when you get into a crowded area, you often have to move a lot of other things because the storm sewer doesn't have anywhere to move because it's got to maintain the gravity flow of the water. So those improvements that were designed and planned that are still hopefully on the table for the future include a new crossing of State Street with an 18-inch storm sewer connecting to that storm sewer on the north side of Panama that was constructed, and then replacement of a existing 12-inch storm sewer with upsize that to an 18-inch storm sewer, tying into the existing 18-inch storm sewer. So that would be a continuous 18-inch storm sewer to provide better drainage out of that area. And then in addition, there was a planned 12-inch that would connect to Edgewood Court storm sewer. and also then go to the creek. That storm sewer is quite a bit shallower than the State Street storm sewer, so that would be kind of an overflow. In the event that this system backed up, I think it had to get about 4 feet surcharge in the manhole, then it would send water, additionally send water to the west on Edgewood. It's kind of a relief if and when the storm sewer gets over capacity in significantly larger events. So that's kind of what we have as the plan for phase 2 of addressing the South Street Panama Avenue concerns. So that was one of the areas we wanted to talk about. I don't know if Jay, if you want to stop and talk about this one now, or move through the other and then come back as people have questions.
I think just continue on.
Okay.
Unless somebody have questions.
I just have a question. The next one, the summary of the like. This one he has a cost estimate. This one he doesn't.
Yeah.
Is there a
Tim,
cost
Tim,
estimate?
I don't think there's ever been a cost estimate done for the Panama project, right?
Well, in 2008, there was an estimate in 2008 when the project was bid that I was able to recover, which was based on the contractor who was installing the improvements. The village requested costs from them to install these other improvements, and I believe in 2008 that cost was about $160,000. But we have not had a chance to look at that and update that since that time.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, you had said the South Street project increased that storm sewer to 18-inch storm sewers. And
Yes.
For map, South Street then goes down into Panama Street, the same storm sewer system. Is the north side of Panama also 18-inch that dumps into?
Yes.
And what's the size of the south side of Panama Street, the blue line?
That's a 12-inch storm sewer.
There's a scale on your map. If you look up in the corner.
So that's kind of where we're at with the problem issue now is you've got the 18 and that 12 all coming together in a 15-inch across State Street.
Well, and it looks like, unless I'm reading it wrong, do the two connect at West and Panama? Or Elm?
Label West, but Elm.
Sorry, Elm, I didn't know where the hell West was.
By south.
At Elm.
I don't think that they connect, but maybe Public Works, if they're there, could correct me. But I think that inlet is in the street and goes south, but it doesn't connect. I don't think they interconnect at that point.
The dots are the manifolds, right, or the grates for the storm. So if I'm reading this right, all the grates on this one lead into the smaller pipe, and there's no grates on the 18-inch?
Right. I believe that's true.
Okay.
The 12-inch was existing and providing drainage for Panama, and then
This project was bid, why wasn't there grates put into the larger pipe that was being put in?
I'd have to look into the history of that. I think it was because this project was focused on providing drainage on South Street and then delivering that over to the storm sewer on State Street, and then the Panama Avenue was going to be handled by the existing storm sewer, and then they both would have benefited from the larger crossing of State Street. So without the larger crossing of State Street, then it's going to the same place.
So in your professional opinion then, if we were to upgrade the crossing on State Street, that would alleviate the flooding? It has nothing to do with the smaller pipe and all of the inlets going into the smaller pipe?
I think that would alleviate it because what you get is a situation, you kind of see where it changes from blue to green, where you've got 12-inch, you got the 18-inch on South Street going into a 12-inch, and the Panama coming in, and they're going into a 15-inch across State Street. So there's not capacity for, Panama ends up getting surcharged with a lack of capacity in big events. So if you added the 18-inch across State Street and allowed South Street to basically bypass the connection with Panama, then there would be available capacity for Panama to drain through this 15-inch, which would now no longer be accepting the water from the South Street storm sewer.
In terms of like interrupting State Street and businesses, is 18 going to be adequate for future events? I mean, or would it be smart to cross with like 30? So you know you have adequacy.
Can you give us calculation on the volume of water from 12 to 6? Or from 12 to 18? Is the volume of water through the flow line of the pipes?
I could get back to you on that. It's because I'm not good at doing math on the fly, but it's more than, you think that a 12-inch is a third larger than an 18-inch, but it's, if you remember your high school math, the area of a pipe has a radius squared, pi r squared. So the radius, you have more than a third of an increase. And I don't know the exact numbers, but you have more increase in capacity of the pipe than proportionally you would expect if you just looked at the increase in size from 12 to 18. So you have that 6 inches increase, but which is a third larger pipe, but it is more than a third larger flow.
For the 2019 Kane County ordinance that you said they updated, what's the new minimum pipe standard for storm systems?
So the Kane County ordinance does not have a storm sewer standard. It is left to the local community. So in Hampshire, we use a 10-year storm event, which is the standard across the area.
Okay, and what size pipe is a 10-year?
Oh, what size pipe would convey a 10-year storm out of this area?
Right.
I'd have to look back at the calculations from South Street from 2008 to determine that. So, but to answer the question about the 30-inch, I mean, we could put a 30-inch across in the hopes of future being able to, increase the size. But at this time, since you have this stretch of 18-inch and 24-inch all the way to the creek, the 30-inch would, be limited by the ability of the 18-inch that exists.
No, I mean,
Something you can do with a look towards the future.
do it one time, and then just worry about maintenance, not doing it again in 10 years.
Yes, that's a possibility. It would be more, like I mentioned, there's a lot of conflicts there. So that may have been a consideration. I don't recall.
Tim, the next step we're going to be doing is asking you to give us some pricing on this. So keep both dimensions in mind. We can price it both ways, okay?
Okay. We will update the estimates and include an option for a 30-inch storm sewer crossing at State in order to be prepared in the future if that storm sewer on the west side of State Street has an opportunity to be upsized. Who knows? And at some point, maybe State Street gets reconstructed completely, and there's an opportunity to upsize that storm sewer. I'm going to resume here and go over to Highland. I think hopefully many of you are familiar with the drainage investigation we did on Highland. In 2018, I think we had a presentation to the board last year on some solutions for that. So we had one option which provides the ability of the storm sewer on Highland to convey the 10-year storm event out of that area, which it currently is unable to do. there's an existing 18-inch that goes up to a certain point, and then there's a 12-inch and a small 10-inch going to the north. I'm going to zoom back in here, talk about these two pieces of the pipe of the improvement. Sorry about that. So you see where the 18-inch starts, then there's some, there's a low area in the roadway. There's just not enough. And some area to the north that all goes into a 10-inch storm sewer. And it's just not enough to convey it to the 18-inch. So what happens is the 10-inch storm sewer is unable to convey water, then that low area in the street starts to flood, and then that's the point where it spills over down the driveway to that one house that has the garage floor well below the elevation of the road. And so upsizing that to a 15-inch allows that water to get to the 18-inch sooner, and the 18-inch has capacity for that, because what happens in the existing condition is there's still capacity in the 18-inch, it just can't get there through the existing storm sewer and inlets fast enough to prevent the ponding. But adding this improvement, and then on the west side of Highland, the second improvement would be adding a new outfall for this. There's a storm sewer along Panama that ties into Highland storm sewer before it goes into White Oak Ponds. So what we would do is add a new outfall for Panama. We would disconnect this system from Highland, and then so that would no longer be contributing to the 18-inch storm sewer that goes into White Oak Ponds. And those two improvements combined would allow the storm sewer drainage to function at the 10-year storm event level for Highland Avenue. That means, at least according to the modeling that we do for storm sewers, the 10-year event could be handled by the storm sewer without causing that flooding at the one resident who has the worst problems.
And Tim, of the three proposals, what's the cost of this proposal?
This was just under 110,000 in the 2018 estimate, and that included, design and engineering, design, construction, engineering, surveying, permitting, in addition to construction. And I don't have an exhibit, but we also had some, an option that would provide a 100-year level of protection for the 100-year event, and that mainly was this whole section of 18-inch from where it starts down to White Oak Ponds would be upsized to a 30-inch.
So just one question.
Yes.
The chunk of pipe that dumps into the pond, that pond's rated to hold so many gallons of water, correct?
Well, that pond is actually, that's
So if the
it's
circumference.
part of a connected system. So I believe, that the whole system functions. So, if you put that water in there, it was going from there. It was going into the pond. Currently, it goes into this pond.
Right.
And actually, if I remember right, that's not actually a detention basin. That's a wetland. But if the question is that allowed, and will it mess up something else? I believe the answer is no, we could do that and not disrupt, the downstream area where we're discharging.
Sorry, I have a question. I wasn't on the board in 2018, so this may seem stupid, but we've, for the past 2 years, have talked about a proposal that was just under $400,000, and why we didn't do things in this one.
So
You had said it was proposed in 2018 that it was 115,000.
Three proposals.
Okay, so there were three. This one's 100 and something thousand. Why wouldn't EEI have said go with this proposal if they can afford it to fix it? Why would we have chosen the more expensive one? Is there doubt that this would work?
well, this provides a level of protection. So there's no overland. The low area that floods into that resident's home, there's no overland route to get rid of that water. It's got to go in the storm sewer. And there's no feasible way to create an overland route. So the $400,000 solution provides storm sewer large enough to handle the 100-year event. And this solution provides an option that provides protection to the 10-year event.
Okay,
So normally with storm sewer, you're going to have a 10-year storm sewer, and if you exceed the 10-year storm, then it triggers an overland route, and it flows away through the emergency overland flow route. So, you know, lacking the ability to have an overland flow route, that's why we had a design for the 100-year storm sewer.
okay, so anything over the 10-year event amount, there would still be flooding with this option.
Correct.
I feel like they even like
What's-
told us how many inches. Like,
What's the total inch, because you gave us the 100-year, what's a 10-year event considered? What's the total rain?
The 24-hour 10-year event is about 3.5 inches.
In a 24-hour period.
Yes. But the design is for like a time of concentration for this particular storm sewer. I forget what exactly it is. I think it might have been a 1-hour event. So the 10-year 1-hour event is like, 2 inches in somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 inches in that 1 hour. So because in the storm sewer, you're looking at, in this situation, we're looking at the very high intensity events where you have a short amount of, or in a small duration, you have a large amount of rain are the ones that really cause the issue here. If the rainfall is more spread out, the storm sewer has time to move the water away and catch up. It doesn't get overwhelmed.
When we did this 2 years ago, like Aaron said before, he was on the board, there were 3 proposals. The one proposal, we were told probably wouldn't work. The second proposal, they said it should work, but there's no guarantee. The third proposal of the 400,000 was that would work, and that's the best scenario, and that's why nothing's ever been done there, because we didn't want to throw money at the wall for nothing.
Well, so as I recall, and I can check and get you those options, but this as option number 1 was, it works, like I said, to the 10-year event. So it provides a better level of protection than exists now. There were 2 options for a 100-year storm sewer. One was to replace this existing 18-inch. The second, as I recall, was to run this 18-inch with a 30-inch. The second was to run a second 18-inch on the north side, and then just replace this downstream section across Centennial into the pond at White Oak Ponds. And those were both ended up being similar cost-wise in the neighborhood of the 400,000, and they both provided the 100-year level of protection. So we had the 10-year level of protection option, and then the 100-year level of protection. So, the 10 years, I believe, is a significant improvement, but still, that's statistically once every 10 years, you would still see that home flood.
well, I feel like too that all the backyards are connected on either side, which was something that came up too, so that adds into it. They're saying 2 inches of rain, we've been getting 4 inches because we've been measuring it. And so when we're getting all the backyards, literally there's 10 inches of standing water in the road. So, and that's after the rain has stopped. So we're getting backyards from both sides. I think part of Panama is even tied into a certain point for the backyards.
So Tim, real quick, so are you saying because there is no overland route, unless we do the 30-inch, we are leaving ourselves, in a scenario where there is overland routes, 30-inch pipes aren't as necessary, but in this particular area, in order to be secure, not just against the 10-year floods, but against the 100-year floods, that the 30-inch is giving us the full solution. Whereas if we were to do the $108,000 solution, and we all know the 10-year numbers aren't correct anymore. Unless you're seeing that, it appears to me that the rains are coming at
you know, we got entire glacier, you know, sheets of glaciers being eliminated on the North Pole. There's more water in the system, so more water is falling on the ground. So if we do this 10-inch sort of, and I thought we called it a Band-Aid at the time. I think that was the term that was used, was a Band-Aid. We will solve some of the problems, but we'll still leave ourselves vulnerable to some of the more significant rains. And in order to solve the significant rains, the $110,000 we spend on this will do us no good towards the $400,000 to do a real solution. Is that correct?
Well,
Or am I
Not exactly.
Okay.
Tim, let me just address this for a minute as a non-expert, but as a person trying to bring about a practical solution here. This would have made a big difference in both of the events that we had over in May. We had roughly 3.8 inches of rain over 3 days, so that's not quite a 10-year event. And they had water very close to their driveway, but not in the basement.
We sandbagged, and that prevents it from going.
Well, no, it didn't get to your sandbags. I was there both times. I think you would agree. Sandbags didn't protect your house. The water never quite got to that level. It got very close. So the point is, there's going to be water in the street in Highland with this approach, but it will be much better than it was in the last two events. And I think that the families on that street, in particular the one that's here tonight, that their house would be much better off than it is today. And the difference between $110,000 and it was more like $430,000 when we got to the end of it, is a big difference. And so what we discussed a month ago, is there anything we can do that the village can afford now that would improve the situation? And this would have pretty much eliminated the risk of the Moyer's house during both of the events in May. And I would like Tim to address that there is some value in this first step if we went to a further step down the road. It's not as much.
Okay.
It's not 100%. But Tim, if you could address that there is some improvement. This is somewhat of a step one.
yes. So the section of replacing the 10-inch with the 15-inch, that is an improvement that would be installed in either of the options. So that is an improvement that is beneficial in the 100-year option and is part of the 100-year option. When you do the 100-year option, it turns out that, you know, the disconnection from Panama isn't necessary to make it function. You know, it doesn't do you any, it doesn't do any harm that it's been installed. It's going to help you in the event something catastrophic, happens, but it's not necessary to provide the 100-year event. So about half the improvement, I would say, is also part of the larger improvement.
But theoretically, we would say $60,000 of the 100, well, maybe $55,000 of the 110 we spend, in a sense, would be paid down towards the $430,000 solution. I'm not asking for a hard number, but in general.
Yes, that's the answer.
Right.
And let me just create some context for this discussion tonight. The purpose tonight was, I think Tim did a really good job of giving us all a little bit of background on how stormwater management has been handled. I do want to offer to let Dave Sterrett, if he has any comments, say anything here, but what we could do here, and there's no magic wand here, we don't have $250,000, $300,000 in our budget right now. But as we look at revenues in the next couple of months, it's going to be a very difficult couple of months, as we talked a month ago when you were here about the current budget with our existing revenues. We'll be starting to forecast in early July, but we see significant drops in sales tax, income tax, certainly the gaming tax. Those are where we're going to get hit the hardest. And we'll have a much better idea in the middle to end of July and where we stand on that. But as we begin to reconsider the budget and we look at what's in the budget, it's conceivable that you could consider other changes in the budget, or if revenues are higher than we expect, that there's an opportunity that those could conceivably be done in this current fiscal year. Certainly there was no option to put the $450,000 in this current year budget. So you have an opportunity here to potentially address Panama and Highland Avenue issues for under $300,000 or like $250,000. Not in the budget right now, but something that you could consider at a later time. So what I would commit to after this meeting, once we've answered any further questions, is that we will go back and address the numbers, get more accurate quotes, precise quotes, and also address some of the questions that you had in terms of the sizing of the pipe. And this would come back to the Public Works Committee for further discussion before it ever comes to the board for any kind of vote. So
Could we do Highland first or is Panama more important?
that would be entirely your call. I would suggest that you consider the houses that flooded and have water in the basements as the highest priority, but that's entirely up to the board. Dave, you have anything like that? Any questions for Dave?
Can I point out an inconsistency that's with that map there? Because I live at 305 Panama Avenue, and where it's showing the storm sewers, they stop before 277 or something similar to that on there. I have an open storm drain that is up at the top of my street that flows straight down my driveway, which that clearly is not addressed in this year whatsoever. Every year, snowfall, rainfall, I get backage up into my driveway. David's been out there multiple times. Colin, when he was here, has been out there multiple times. Everything that was ever told to me was because I don't have a culvert. This year, I've had multiple people out looking at my driveway to redo it, and every single one of them is telling me it's because the drainage going down is not draining properly. There is not an adequate flow that goes from the corner of Warner and Panama down to the retention that's right there in the middle. There is more water that is on the street. Granted, I did not have as much deep water as the folks on Highland Avenue, but when I was going through and I put a video up on Facebook with it, I was in up to Big Calf. So I think there's more issues than just what's laying on here on this.
Did you have water in your basement in May?
I did get water in my basement for the first time in 12 years. I've lived here 12 years.
Well, we will, Dave, you're familiar with this area, right? We'll take a look at that and make sure that it's properly drawn and addressed in this proposal. Thank you.
Dave, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say this line right here, dumping into that tension. That situation a lot. What happens is over by your house, comes down the street, it dumps into a retention here, it comes out and impacts the line that Highland's fighting for. So if we can eliminate the volume of water that comes down from Panama, down Centennial, and then you have Highlands dumping into Centennial, fighting right here, if we can push that out, I think that would help the drainage on Highland, of course.
Where that 10 inch is replaced with a 15, I mean, they get a lot of, you know, to me, it's really deep back there in their backyards. My concern is that now we're gonna be dumping more water on that, and if that line at the end is gonna be evacuated basically 3 times what it's doing, it's gonna be
Well,
still
like
a
our
mess.
village manager is saying, let's get started with something.
Right.
You know, if it works 2/3.
Well, I'm trying to be,
Better than what it is now, so be it.
totally, I'm concerned that now, so we rectify the situation just Highland. I know we're dumping more water in the backyard of Panama, they're gonna be in a mess.
No, they'll be, I think.
That's what the engineers get paid to do, right? So I
Well,
don't think they're gonna
what
create a
happens
situation.
Every rain is 2 doors down my neighbor's house. When Highland backs up, it floods in his backyard. It comes down the least path of resistance, I believe.
Because he's connected into
us.
us, because when his thing goes,
Right.
that's in the front yard on Highland, because they're connected in. And so that's why it's a
He's
mess.
got it coming from both ways. He's got it coming from the Panama side, and he's got it coming
I
from the
think
Highland side.
I think what we all have to recognize is in this part of town, these homes were built before there was any flood management required or provided. Okay? I think there were actually some litigation over some homes in this area, so these areas were built without any consideration for water runoff. And I would say, and I'm not an expert like Tim is, but backyards and roads are designed to be backup waterways. So I'm not as concerned sitting here today, looking for solutions to water in somebody's backyard or in the street. That's pretty typical. It will go away over time. We're trying to protect people's personal belongings and their homes. I think in an area like, in fact, in almost every area of the town, we get a lot of standing water during these large rains. And most of the time it's because either current pond systems are not being properly maintained, like up in Lakewood. We have some real problems up there. The homeowner association is not maintaining their ponds. And in areas like this where it was just never engineered into the development. So there are going to be ways that we can improve it, but we can never make these areas perfect. They were just built before standards were really set. So,
And how often are we sending cameras down?
Fix them off one at a time.
Storm systems.
On Highland or just everywhere?
Anywhere in town,
We have
if it's an issue or
an
something.
issue or a.
Because I remember, if you remember back when the sinkhole happened in front of my house, on Grove and Baldwin, your guys were like, right, chest high in that sinkhole fixing.
Okay, yeah.
Prior to that sinkhole, I had gotten water up through the drain in my basement, and it had come from this city's stormwater system. Because it's one of those houses that was built before where the basement's a little lower. But what we also found when you guys got in there and fixed stuff is that that pipe was 80% blocked from debris that had gotten in there. And so when that got cleared out and the pipe got fixed, and the sinkhole got fixed, and then there was a crack in the pipe further up Grove, and that got sleeved, I think. Never again was there ever a problem. In fact, you could hear water rushing, right? It was cleared out. The reason why I ask is, I wonder how many of these areas where we never had problems before that we started to have problems. Yes, we need to change pipes, we need to fix that. How many of them are also experiencing blockage issues where maybe a first intermediary step is we need to scope these, get them completely cleared out so the max flow that could happen is happening. And then also take these projects on where we're putting the bigger pipes in there as well. Because the pipes on Grove were cracked, crushed, and 80% full, right? So they were just old. They're from the 50s. So I wonder how, if we're talking about these older parts of towns, how much that's happening on Panama and some of these other streets as well, as just a way to try to help while we're getting the money.
And with the Panama, the 100 block, the concern actually, we just recently went out with our camera and started. We've got the whole south side televised and everything looks fine. We have to jump on the north side and work our way back. To answer your question about Panama, we were talking about the 18-inch on the north side. It doesn't go anywhere. It does. What happens is it comes down from South Street and it gets to State Street, and then it has nowhere to go except when it gets high enough, there's circulars in the manhole, it can cross over Panama to the south through, I think it's like a 12-inch pipe. The problem is that water's got to get so high, and that's why you're blowing the lids off, because the force of that water coming down, it hits the wall at State Street, what do I do now? Well, it pops lids, and then it waits to come up, and then it will blow over. So at that point, the rain, you're already got there. But we are televising as we get calls and trying to be proactive.
I just know in that one case it helped.
Absolutely.
Okay.
just for the record, you were not on the board at the time, right?
Oh, no. I don't know. Why do you think I ran for it?
All right, any additional questions for Tim?
So Tim, in your professional recommendation, we should absolutely go with this $100,000 now to alleviate as much as possible within what we can control for our budget.
I would say yes. If it's a significant improvement, and in the storm sewer modeling, the existing condition, it handles less than a 5-year event. This improvement would handle a 10-year event. So you're looking at, statistically, then you're once every 10 years instead of once every 5 years that you would see, or once less than every 5 years. It didn't quite, the existing storm sewer doesn't quite handle the 5-year event. So it is a significant improvement if the village is able to do it.
Thank you.
All right, move our cars. Let's get started.
We'll donate 8,000 pounds. Put a beach in your backyard with all the sand.
Yeah. Side of our house.
Anything further, Mr. Hedges?
No, sir.
All right, thank you, Tim.
All right, I was just, one last thing I was gonna say there was, we're looking for funding opportunities when, when they're available. We do additional investigation as necessary as things come up. If there's new developments, we try to take advantage of those opportunities. The White Oak Ponds and Hampshire Highland developments allowed for the Hillcrest storm sewer improvements and would allow for Highland storm sewer improvements to occur, where they wouldn't be able to occur until those newer developments had improved the infrastructure. So we keep our eye out when new grant programs come out. If there's a new infrastructure funding bill, then we always take a look to see if there are opportunities for drainage improvements. Oftentimes, if you get funding for a roadway improvement, that sometimes you can do storm sewer improvements in conjunction with that. So we just, we try to keep our eye out on those and make you aware of any opportunities that come up.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right. I will unshare. I can figure it out now.
All right, planning and zoning. Mr. Robinson.
No report from me tonight.
Public safety.
Go ahead.
You really want me to?
Yeah.
Been dealing with some more protesters last night. Not a huge concern. Probably dealt with 50 up at the park up in Siler. They mobilized and went downtown. Probably about 25. Contained them on the east side of the roadway. No issues. Just kind of all came to an end around 9 o'clock, 9:15 last night.
All right,
A lot of graffiti.
here.
Chalk.
Just chalk, right?
Chalk.
Chalk.
But when you put chalk into wood, and you're doing that, you have to get it out with a brush and soap water. Yeah.
Any further, sir?
Pardon me?
Any further?
No.
Field and trail.
Well, before, I just wanted to add something to public safety, and it's a comment that I wanted to make after the incident that we had on Wednesday, where we had the state police come in. There were several people that called me, and I had an opportunity to talk to Chief Thompson, about citizens who took it on their own to potentially go out and become law enforcement. And I wanted to make a public statement here to say, and I hope I have the support of the board, that as bad as people destroying property is outside the law and is bad, and we should be against that. We should also equally be against any citizen who may feel it their duty to take up arms and go searching for problems, to whether it's to protect a company, whether it's to protect an idea. And there was video, I guess, I talked to Chief Thompson about. We had video of these people going around. And I just know, as people called me to express their concerns about that. And I hope it gets into the minutes that is certainly not the way that we want to handle protecting our town. We have police to do that. We call them the state police, professionals who are trained, who understand what they're doing. And I just wanted to get that on record and make that statement that we as a village do not support civilians, taking to the streets with weapons to do that. Weapons are designed to protect yourself from somebody coming at you, but to go out seeking it, I think, is something that I certainly wanted to express on behalf of those who expressed it to me. That is something that I certainly want to do. And it does not help our problem, it only makes it worse.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Does Field and Trail have a report?
No, we haven't. That's very dangerous. It hurt me last 2 weeks ago.
Village services. What's that? Public Works,
Rocking and rolling.
back to the BDC.
PDC, we've got, we've got a series of things coming. We've got, Beautification Committee has a meeting on the 29th of, this month. Everybody's invited to come. We've got the application for Christina Michelle Salon, which is the old Fifth Third, building. They're gonna bring a proposal for, redoing that entire building. We also have a official application in from the Vintage Hammer is another one that we'll be considering. And then, Gina, did you guys?
Yes,
yours?
I have that. I'll drop it off tomorrow.
Okay, and so.
The cave, I also have one.
The cave will also have one. So, the Beautification Committee is doing a fantastic job. They'll also be undertaking the wayfinding, signs, proposal that we had brought to you guys maybe 18 months ago, and it was pushed back at us to say that it wasn't, it was too general. But Beautification has done a great job of getting the details. They've worked with Mike Armato. We're gonna have some hard numbers, some actual hard proposals that you guys will be able to consider as perhaps part of the streetscape program. That was something the board had asked us to do. And then we've got, we had a presentation by the Entree Solutions regarding the, just like a little funny, the unsellable property up near 90 that the guy who told us it was unsellable now owns, and is promoting. Which I just find funny, because he was before saying it was unsellable and now he owns it. But that was great, and we're excited about that, potential development up there near the truck stop. And then finally, we're excited to announce we will be voting on our final new member, which we'll then bring to the board. But the daughter of Stanley Traska has audited our meeting. She had a great time despite it going 2.5 hours, and emailed me the next day and asked if she could be officially considered to be our final member, which I think for our mission is a really great person, because it's a major developer in town. They own a tremendous amount of land, so and will affect a lot of the growth going forward. To have that person on our board, we think is going to be a really big deal. So, but outside of that, as usual, BDC's got nothing going on.
Brian, the meeting on the 29th.
Yes.
Time and here.
6 o'clock here. Sorry, I should have said that. And it will be posted. I think Bill got his agenda in the last couple of days. So. I think he was trying to do this Monday, but we didn't have enough numbers. But no, other than that,
Program application?
we got 3 coming in. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I forgot about that. It was last minute I added it. But Josh Ray, I guess if you guys have seen, did an incredible job, I think, of taking what Mark Schuster did in the legal world and creating the program. And then we never really sort of made it, I think, consumable for the outside public, really in a way that made it easy to understand. And Josh really took it to the next level. We presented that at the BDC meeting this last go round, and the whole group is fully in support. We think, and I hope you guys concur, that it really cleans things up, makes it easier, and helps people understand exactly what they have to offer, what they have to do. So it just adds a layer of professionalism to it. So. Great, so we appreciate that. I don't know if we have to do an official vote on that, but the BDC, voted 6-0 to, or 6-0 to endorse this as our official paperwork forward and have it posted on the website. So.
It says a motion to approve, so I will entertain a motion to approve the new guidelines for the facade improvement program.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Question, because this came up with Gabber. Is there anything in here that states a limited number of times a single business can apply for the facade program? I didn't see.
There is no limit. So the limit is, as far as a institutional limit, let's say that, right? Doesn't mean that the board might consider. Right. So there is, you mean the total dollar amount?
No, I know that you have a total dollar amount, but like, if I'm Gabber and I see in here, or let's say Kelly Inc., right? I see in here I can get up to 75%.
Yep.
I do one project, I complete it.
Yep.
I apply for another one, and another one, there's no limit to the number I can apply for?
There is not. The only limit is you can't say that if the one project was to do, let's say, windows and you redo the sort of the brick, right, restore to its natural. You can't come back to us and do that project again. But if you say in one you want it, I mean, facades, there's not that much to it, right? So usually one project incorporates pretty much a significant amount of what work can be done. But if you wanted it, so you could do it in parts, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. Question, is there something in there I didn't look at it? Like the business.
Hey, that's consistent.
The business consistent, not consistent with me.
I'm just joking.
The fifth third business,
Yes.
they have to be open and actively working for, we're gonna come in and facade money, right? They're not gonna come in and get the whole, before the business opens, we're gonna do the whole facade deal before they open.
That's what we
They
did.
have-
We did that for
We
Gabriel.
just did that for guardian angels. Yes.
As long as you have.
Well, that wasn't a
W9.
facade. That was picture.
Oh.
To answer your question, so there's not,
There's not a stipulation.
I just asked.
Yeah, no, it's.
I just have one question on language that was in there. It said that you cannot paint unpainted brick,
Yes.
okay? Paint and stain are two different things, correct? So I can stain my brick, but I cannot paint my brick.
Yeah, so if you look at
I
Roy's
just wanted
project,
to,
yeah, Roy's
because Roy's
project,
is stained.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was correct, because there's some buildings that have painted brick, which is fine. Like our back half of the building is brick and it's painted, but it's cinder block brick, it's not the nice brick on the front of the building.
And Bill as well has, those are questions that you and Bill need to go over,
Okay.
because there are some specific things.
I just,
but
if
we'll
you're,
talk- No, that's
if
a fair
you're
question.
voting on it right now, and
Well, we haven't, and it's just for the record, we didn't change any of the substance of the ordinance, we just made it look nicer and easier. And gave us a good process that is easy for you.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klein. Aye. Mr. Coe.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Anything further, sir?
No, that'll do it, actually. So our next meeting is the 8th.
Nothing further.
I was gonna say, we have a meeting July 8th, I'm supposed to say that, right? It's part of my job. July 8th. You wanna come hang out with us?
6:30, July 8th?
6:30, Village Hall, I think it's July 8th.
Yep. Anything further, sir? What are you asking me there?
Yeah, so that's fun.
Never know. White had a couple items. Accounts payable.
Yeah. All right, let's do reimbursement. So in front of you, you have reimbursement for $257.94 to be paid on before June 18th, 2020. Any questions?
What? I will entertain a motion to approve accounts payable in the amount of $257.94.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coe.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klein.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
And then our regular accounts payable, $228,168.90 to be paid on or before June 24th, 2020. Any questions?
Yes, pages 1 and 2, because it goes from 1 to 2, P and F.
Yes.
We have 4 line items where they tell us what each charge is: solar panel plan review, single plan review, single family plan review, and single family plan review. That all makes sense to me. And then we have a $10,000 charge for just May's plan review. Why do we have some line item and one just big $10,000 lump sum?
I didn't hear how you described the last one.
A big $10,000 lump sum.
All of May's inspections.
All of May's inspections are just one line item, and everything else for June is individual line items. So why do we have a two different ways.
So we get multiple different bills. The inspections come by date and dollar amount, and then we receive plan review things on a separate, kind of like a separate invoice. So I think they've just been detailed out that way. Are you asking to look at the $10,000 thing, or?
No, I just wonder why in some cases we have it as a line item, and then for the same plan reviews, we just have a big one.
It's plan reviews and inspections. So, like this, if it's, so $100 plan review is a repeat model of a home that's been, like thoroughly reviewed. If you get your fence, you get, a tiny charge. Those tiny charges and the inspections come together on one, and then the larger ones come individually.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I will entertain a motion to approve accounts payable in the amount of $228,168.90.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Did you switch rooms on us, Mr. Robinson?
He does. Right, Eric? Every meeting you switch rooms?
Is the kitchen on? Or are you at Toby's house?
Toby's house. I'm at your house now.
All right, roll call, so you get home.
Ms. Klein. Aye. Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson.
Aye.
Mr. Gajeki.
Aye.
Mr. Coe.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, anything further, ma'am?
No.
Any other public relations?
I was gonna defer to,
Not that I know of anyway. He's not late.
Is that late? All right, any new business, other announcements before we adjourn?
Do you have something? For like 2 meetings, you said, well, now I'm not gonna say it. So now.
Nope.
Floor is yours.
Nope.
I just have a question. What led to the change of procedures for the way that the meeting was run with roll call votes? Because I looked and I don't have any notifications, no emails.
There was new legislation passed by the General Assembly when they were in session.
Okay, was that in the Illinois Municipal League update?
Yes. And I thought I sent that out to all the members, maybe I didn't, I thought I did. But yes, the legislature came down
I
and
was just curious.
voted on.
100% different. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
They do that.
Thank Governor Pritzker.
It's because of the electronics.
So the electronic attendance is now permanent?
Well, if we choose to, as long as we're using it, we have to use these new rules.
So once we go back to normal, non-online, we don't have to do it anymore?
I would suggest that we never go back, to be honest, but that's.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean,
Always
we've always allowed electronics along. The difference was prior it was because you were not here because of work,
That's correct.
but it still allowed it. So in that case, it would have required roll call for every vote.
That's just the new legislation.
Right, that's what I'm saying though. So even if we roll back, if somebody attends electronically because of work, which is allowed, then that meeting has to be all roll call.
I can't answer that, I'm sorry.
No, I think that's only during the executive order. If the executive order is no longer by the governor, then we don't follow these OMA rules. But as long as that executive order is in place, we must follow it. Before, when we've had other people attend via telephone, they weren't as sophisticated as we are now, and it was always normal procedure.
That's why I was just asking.
So once the governor rescinds his executive order, then we'll go back to normal.
Right. You'll have to wait to see what happens on June 27. That's the extent of the last disaster proclamation extension. So we'll see what happens then with the governor.
Any other announcements? No? Dave, anything for class? Thanks for showing up. Thank you. Bill, thank you. For the big help.
Yeah.
Not that you're slow and you can always step it up. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Do I have that roll call?
yes, you do.
Roll call.
Wow.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
No. No.
No. Okay. Mr. Coe?
Yes.
Mr. Jackie? Ms. Robinson?
Aye.